staff last spring. They have since been returned to work. However, some staff decided not to return. Children and Youth Services is working with providers to safely plan for a return to in-person parenting classes, evaluations, and other services. So right now, the parenting classes are occurring, but it's occurring through a platform primarily through Teams, and the evaluations that are being conducted, like psychiatric evaluations, psychological evaluations, and substance abuse evaluations, are being done virtually as well. Children and Youth Services has continued to increase utilization of family engagement services, specifically family group decision-making, crisis rapid response meetings, and youth transition conferences. In fiscal year 2021, there were 111 families referred for a family group decision-making meeting as well as a crisis rapid response meeting, and 88 conferences were completed. 26 youth and their support systems participated in a youth transition conference. These forums use a neutral coordinator and a facilitator to help extended families come together to plan for children and to develop support plans for the families. These family engagement efforts help to reduce the need for placement in out-of-home care. Placements of children in out-of-home care have steadily decreased over the past 5 years. The number of children in out-of-home care has decreased by 25% over the past 5 years. Kinship care is now almost 40% of all of our foster care placements. Delaware County Children and Youth Services has contracted with a maternal child health organization to offer, develop, and provide oversight for plans of safe care for substance-affected infants. All families with substance-affected infants are offered the opportunity to develop a plan of safe care, a multidisciplinary team effort to provide families with resources for treatment and support. Children and Youth Services is teaming with the courts and CASA, who are the court-appointed special advocates, to develop a diversity and equity in child welfare task force. We also have added an onboarding specialist to support new staff and help them acclimate to child welfare with the goal of improving staff retention. Our challenges are staff recruitment and retention. Children and Youth Services, like many child welfare agencies across the state, is having difficulty recruiting and retaining qualified staff. Approximately 47% of all of our casework staff have worked for the agency for less than 2 years. Congregate care and complex case planning for youth. While Children and Youth Services has seen a decrease in the number of children entering congregate care settings, there are still children with complex behavioral and physical health needs who enter congregate care settings. There are not enough specialized foster care settings to meet the needs of those youth. When a youth has been recommended for a medically necessary residential treatment, there is still difficulty locating an appropriate setting, despite that medical recommendation from a psychiatrist. Delaware County has utilized the complex case planning process to address these challenges. The complex case plan process starts at the county level, where we bring disciplines together through our Office of Behavioral Health, through Juvenile Probation, through Children and Youth Services, and we come together to address the challenging situation that is before us. However, we've had to progress to the state complex case review level that involves the same disciplines, but also involves the regional office of Children and Youth and Families. Typically, we've been able to manage things at that level, but we most recently have a complex case review process that's involving the state office of Children, Youth, and Families. So at that point in time, after that, typically we've been able to come to some resolution and find a placement for that youth. Children and Youth Services has seen a substantial increase in the number of referrals for truancy. The agency contracts for truancy services through a dependency and delinquency partnership grant. There is currently a waiting list for services due to the high level of need in the county. Children and Youth Services is considering the option of having some intake staff focus solely on addressing truancy referrals. The truancy referrals, we've been getting so many, and it's really as a result of the children needing to learn remotely at home. They're not signing on, and the schools are calling us, and so the truancy referrals have really skyrocketed over this year.
So I'm going to pick up on what our challenges are for our budget for 21-22.
Your microphone.
I'm going to pick up on our challenge or our priorities for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23. So in accordance with the Federal Family First Prevention Services Act, Children and Youth is expanding our number of evidence-based, community-based, in-home services to meet the needs of families. The Family First Prevention Services Act is really focused on increasing in-home and diversionary services and decreasing the use of congregate care. So this year we're going to be doing requests for proposals for intensive family coaching. Intensive family coaching is parent-child interaction therapy, but it's done in the home with the family, with a therapist who will coach the parent. We're looking at a PPP parenting program. It's an evidence-based parent education program, as well as Home Builders, which is a home and community-based intensive family preservation service treatment program. And it's really designed to avoid unnecessary placement of children into out-of-home care. We are responsible to make sure that any model that we work with has model fidelity. So we will be working closely with all providers to ensure that there's model fidelity for all of our evidence-based practices. Sure. You're welcome. We're also going to be issuing an RFP for certified recovery specialists. They are drug and alcohol peers in recovery who've been trained to help others move into and through the recovery process. We want them to work with our parents. We have a lot of parents who are struggling with issues of addiction to help them through that recovery process and help children stay at home. We're also working with the state as they move forward to develop a statewide case management system. Currently, we use a system called CAPS. We contract as our case management system, but very soon the Department of Human Services at the state is going to have a case management system for all of the child welfare agencies across the state of Pennsylvania. And that's anticipated to go live in federal fiscal year 22-23. And so we're working closely with them. We have staff on the committees with the state to design the program. We also continue to focus on the efficacy of all of our contracted providers. So we're doing fiscal and program audits of all of our providers on a rotating basis, and we're committed to maximizing all of our existing resources to make sure that we're providing effective and fiscally responsible services for children. And we're committed to continuous quality improvement. We participated in a quality services review in fiscal year 2019-2020 and developed a county improvement plan. We're going to continue to work that plan and focus on enhancing services to meet the needs of children and families. And we'll turn this over to juvenile probation.
Thank you. Again, my name's Jeremy from the Juvenile Probation Department. Myself and Dan Burke to my right are going to provide you with a brief overview of our department, what we do, who we are, talk about some of our goals and challenges, highlight, our mission, some of our system enhancement updates, and finally talk about some budgetary highlights. Now, our role in the needs-based budgeting process is a little more simple compared to CYS. We go through this process to fund our contracted services, while Children and Youth Services is a little more all-inclusive, funding most of their operations. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So we operate under the authority of the President Judge in the 32nd Judicial District. This slide up, yep, there you go, perfect. This slide just highlights some of the roles and responsibilities that our juvenile probation officers have. I'm certainly not going to read every bullet point on the slide, but we're basically charged with supervising juvenile offenders through the enforcement of the court's order. And as you can see, juvenile probation officers wear many hats on a daily basis. It takes our probation officers many, many months to get up to speed with all the training necessary to become proficient at your job. During the COVID pandemic, I would say there was, slight disruption to our operations, but we were successfully able to adapt, much like the rest of the world, using audio conferencing, audio and visual conferencing for check-ins with our juveniles. We kept the court dockets running through the same methods, staggering appointment times to alleviate crowded waiting rooms, things of that nature that we've all become accustomed to. Check-ins by our service providers were happening on the front porch instead of, in the living room, just to be conscious of everyone's safety. So our referrals from the police departments were down during the quarantine. However, I would say that they've slowly returned to more expected levels. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So we have 4 locations throughout the county. This allows the clients to easily get to their appointments, get to see their probation officers, eliminates transportation barriers, and it also allows our officers to, work with the resources in that area, be familiar with the school personnel, police departments, and, your community resources. So our home office is right here at the courthouse complex, right across the courtyard, and we're also located, as you can see, in Upper Darby, Sharon Hill, and Chester. This graphic on the slide, on the PowerPoint shows our delinquency allegations. This data comes from the 2019 Juvenile Court Judges Commission disposition report. And as you could see, we're a Class 2A county, so we do handle a high volume of cases as compared to the rest of the state. Some of our neighbors in Montgomery County, Lancaster, and York County are comparable to our numbers. However, we are a little behind Allegheny and Philadelphia counties. Okay, next slide, please. The next slide talks about our detention admissions. Again, this data is from 2019. Our average length of stay in detention is something we're always working to decrease, and there's various factors that go into that length of stay. But our use of detention is up there because of the volume of cases we see. And detention is only a temporary holding location while we plan and figure out the best option for the juvenile. If the juvenile is a risk to himself or the community, we are tasked to protect the community. That's one of the pillars of our balanced mission. So this really just does highlight the importance of having detention beds locally available to us. So as I said, one of our pillars of the Balance and Restorative Justice mission is community protection. So that can include the use of detention beds, can include the use of open or secure programming, GPS monitoring, curfew, evening or weekend programs, things of that nature. The second pillar is victim restoration. So we have to always try to restore the victim to the extent possible. And we can do that in a couple ways, allowing the victims to be heard throughout the process, allowing the victims to be informed of what's going on with the court process, attempting to secure timely restitution payments, things like that. The third pillar, youth redemption. Our probation officers really do wear social work hats in their roles, and our goal is to restore the juvenile to be a confident, law-abiding citizen. And our officers do that, on a daily basis, referring to treatment programs, mentoring, working on job skills, things of that nature. Okay, the next graphic talks about the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Strategy. And this is really a statewide initiative. Every county in the state of Pennsylvania is at different points with this strategy. But there's many things that go into it. It's a multi-year implementation, and I think I've been saying the same thing at this meeting for 8 or 9 years now. So it's a lot of work. It's an overhaul of the system to be more evidence-based in your approach. So if you go to the next slide, it just does talk about some of the initiatives that we've undertaken. We've either successfully implemented these or we're in the process of implementing them. If anyone has any questions about these, I'd be happy to talk about it directly after the meeting, or you can get in contact with me at any point. But we have been busy. It's a lot of staff training, a lot of examining data, retraining, booster sessions are important. So, all these go into making ourselves an evidence-based probation department. So all that work is supposed to reduce recidivism and therefore be more friendly on the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about some of our numbers and challenges.
Hi, my name's Dan. I'll be discussing some of juvenile probation's accomplishments during fiscal year 2021, along with priorities and challenges facing juvenile probation as we move forward into fiscal year 21-22. For many years, probation has made it a top priority to utilize the least restrictive setting possible for all delinquent juveniles, providing in-home services as opposed to the costlier out-of-home placement to delinquent youth whenever possible. As you can see from this slide, those efforts have resulted in a significant decrease in placement admissions every year since about fiscal year 2012-2013. During fiscal year 2020-21, probation saw its most significant decrease in placement admissions on record. While the decrease in placements was kind of expected, as we've had that trend for many years now, this decrease was far more drastic than any previous years. The most significant reason for this extreme drop was the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, as out-of-home placements were only being utilized in usually as a last resort when a juvenile had pretty much exhausted any in-home options. It can be expected that as the county and the country continued to return to some semblance of normalcy, that these placement rates may increase from the all-time lows that we experienced in fiscal year 2021. However, with placement admissions decreasing every year, even prior to the pandemic, probation does believe that we'll be able to keep the placement numbers at a very low level in fiscal year 21-22. As mentioned in the previous slide, the decrease in placement admissions in fiscal year 2021 was one of the significant accomplishments for juvenile probation. And along with that large decrease in placement admissions came a significant decrease in detention admissions in fiscal year 2021 as well, as we saw detention admissions drop by 48%, which is pretty in line with the 51% drop we saw in placement admissions during the same time period. Probation also experienced a decrease in the recidivism rate for juveniles discharged from out-of-home placements. This was for the 4th consecutive year. We've seen a drop in this recidivism rate. While previous years had seen a small decrease in recidivism rates with about a 2 to 4% drop each of those years, in fiscal year 2021, probation experienced a 7% decrease in the amount of juveniles being replaced within 1 year of discharge from placement, with the amount dropping to just 13% of juveniles being replaced after having been discharged from placement. In addition to the accomplishments probation achieved in fiscal year 2021, probation also was faced with many new challenges. With the return to some degree of normalcy, probation will face a daunting challenge to keep recidivism rates at an all-time low seen in fiscal year 2021. An additional challenge will be decreasing the average length of stay for juveniles in detention. During fiscal year 2021, probation experienced an increase in the average length of stay at detention for juveniles, with the average length of stay jumping to about 16 days for each juvenile placed. The main reason for this increase can be attributed to a couple different factors. First was with the COVID pandemic came an increased difficulty when it came to placing a child with increased COVID protocols that had to be considered. Sometimes took more timely manner just to get the child safely placed. Also, with only the most difficult cases being placed in out-of-home placements, there were many times, these are the more complex cases, and with that comes more difficulty in finding a proper placement setting, which can therefore result in longer stays at detention. Another new challenge faced by probation in 2021, which will continue to be a challenge moving forward, was the closing of the Juvenile Detention Center at the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Center. In March of 2021, the county's Juvenile Detention Center was shut down, which left probation scrambling for detention providers. Probation was able to contract with some additional providers to provide necessary detention services for delinquent youth in the county. However, the absence of the Juvenile Detention Center is sure to provide a challenging environment going forward. One other challenge moving forward will be to continue to adapt to the ever-changing landscape presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, with the increase or decrease of caseloads of COVID, each thing presents new challenges. With some in-home providers having to go to virtual services as opposed to their normal in-home services. Hopefully we're past that, but you never know with the way the COVID numbers process. Next slide. A few priorities for juvenile probation in fiscal year 21-22. As always, we'll continue to utilize the least restrictive setting possible for all delinquent juveniles, providing the in-home services as opposed to out-of-home services to delinquent youth whenever possible. As Jeremy previously discussed, the continued implementation of the principles of JJSES and the SPEP programs will remain a top priority for juvenile probation in fiscal year 21-22 and moving forward into the future. In addition, probation will begin implementation of the detention risk assessment tool. One additional priority for probation will be working to keep placement costs down, despite increased per diems for the majority of placement providers in fiscal year 21-22. With the pandemic coming and the lower placement admissions, pretty much all providers were requesting rate increases going into fiscal year 21-22. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to keep our placement costs in check, but we will do our best. I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Really want to thank our planning team for their effort in presenting this evening, and all of you for your time and attention in being here. It means a lot to us and to the county and to the children we serve. So we'll open it up now for any questions that any of you have for any of those that are here tonight. Now, our retention rate is much higher than that presently. So to try to answer those questions, I'm going to ask Beth if she could comment a little bit about the retention. I think you mentioned some efforts that were being made.
Sorry. So there are a number of things that we do. We do communicate and talk with universities and try to solicit that way in terms of providing information about what Children and Youth Services does and hoping that we get students from the universities. And we also have what's called a C-Web program. So what that means is that there are students at the university who are going to school for social work, and they can do their field placement at our agency, at a child welfare agency. They then have to commit to 1 year post employment with our agency after they graduate from school. So that's some of the efforts that we're making to recruit staff. The challenge then is keeping the staff after they come to the agency. And we have, I think I mentioned earlier, we have a new position called an onboarding specialist, and that person is there to specifically help and support new caseworkers or staff that are coming to the agency. So we're hoping with that, that's a new addition, that's a new position, and we're hoping that'll be helpful.
That's why we're here to listen for this. So we have different kinds of questions. If there's anything we can do, ask.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.
When you say graduating from school, is it undergrad or graduate? You have to be an undergrad or graduate for the position.
Oh, for the C-Web program? So right. So with the C-Web program, they're undergraduates and they're going to school for Bachelor of Social Work and they do their field placement with us. And when they graduate, then they have a one-year commitment with our agency. However, we will get C-Web students from other agencies where they did their field placement. So it could be a child welfare agency, maybe out in Allegheny County, but they still have a one-year commitment for employment. And that social work student or that student can fulfill their commitment at our agency. They don't need to stay where they did their field placement. Yeah, so that's good.
Yes.
I just want to add, because I'm from the Pennsylvania Council, we represent providers who work with out-of-counties, such as Delaware County. And it's not even an issue that's only specific to Delaware County. It's one of these challenges that agencies are facing statewide and nationally. And I know our providers are also struggling with the workforce development. And our reporting really similar numbers as far as retention goes. Ranging anywhere from like mid-30s to mid-40s talk about their long retention. So it's sort of a tough issue right now for everyone. That's only been sort of exacerbated by COVID, but even existed COVID.
Right. Yep.
When does probation start? When they're first?
Danielle, want me to take that one?
Sure.
Okay. So a little different than the adult system. If the district attorney approves the charges that the police allege, our jurisdiction starts right away. Where as compared to the adult system, it's usually after the sentencing that they're becoming involved, the probation department, that is. Now, there are some minor, status offenses and minor offenses that are handled at the district court level. We only receive those cases should they fail to comply with the district court. But for the vast majority of cases, we're involved right after the arrest or the decision to charge.
Are they responsible to the Delaware County Court?
Correct, yes.
But not at the district justice level?
No, not at the district justice level. Correct.
But at the very beginning stages of truancy takes place, probation doesn't become part of that.
No, generally no. We do help support some diversionary programming, like our youth aid panels, and we're looking into some other forms to support diversion. But yeah, our jurisdiction starts once the case comes here. Yes.
And I guess maybe to further clarify is that although juveniles who enter in the juvenile justice system often have truancy issues or experience truancy circumstances, that's not why they're here. So they're here because they've been charged with an offense that's generally a misdemeanor or felony degree. And as I said, those youth may experience truancy, but that's not how they're being referred to our system. Absolutely. And there's a number of efforts that are being made between the school and CYS to rectify that circumstance for them.
I think that some of it may be attributed to that. What you were saying, that it can be very frustrating trying to learn at home and remotely, and how do you engage in that whole process? And then parents not even really being computer savvy. So that certainly, I think, plays a role into it. I think that truancy is a symptom of a greater problem, though. And I think that some of the issues of truancy is that the parents were not awake themselves. They weren't making the effort to get the children up. And in fact, now that the learning was remotely, I think that they pushed, or they pulled back even just a little bit more. So I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a combination of the parents' lack of engagement and trying to have their children get up and engage and be a part of that process. And then also, it's tough for kids to learn that way. It's tough to have meetings that way. It's hard all around. So I do think there's a variety of things, so yeah.
Until the young grades, would they be considered truant if they aren't getting on time or something? Where do you start truancy?
Yeah, we would look at that as a neglect situation, depending on the age. We do receive referrals of young children that are not getting online and not participating or attending school. So we do get those referrals of younger children that aren't doing it. However, like I said, sometimes that's the symptom of the larger problem, where it's not so much that the 7-year-old doesn't want to do that, it's that their mom or dad's just not getting up, and perhaps it could be due to their substance abuse problems or mental health issues that's interfering with their ability to meet their children's educational needs. So, yeah. I hope so.
Yes.
It's a, I look for child guidance.
Yes, both CYS and JPO utilize the Hi-Fi program here in Delaware County to further support the youth that we have in our systems. Absolutely. Well, I can only speak for juvenile probation, but we are always open to programs that are available, whether they're here in Delaware County or within the state of Pennsylvania, to serve our children. We contracted at one time with Glen Mills. We are not aware of any residential facilities presently in Delaware County that would provide that level of service. But no, that's okay. Well, I would say that Delaware, I guess to clarify, Glen Mills was licensed as an open residential facility for both children and youth and juvenile probation, and different than the detention center, which was licensed for secure detention services. So I think that there is yes, there's a preference to have secure detention beds available in Delaware County. What that will look like will be now left to the Delaware County Detention Board of Managers that were recently appointed for the detention center, yes. No, the detention services comes out of the juvenile probation budget as well. Yes. Yes. It's a piece of the service, the budget that's set up to provide services for youth. Well, I think that Delaware County Juvenile Probation would be very open to open general residential services in Delaware County if a provider or facility became known or available to us. Absolutely. Being able to keep our youth close to home and navigate the reentry with the family is always critical. Any other questions? Well, I think there's two. COVID, certainly, the pandemic certainly contributed to a significant decrease. And I think, as Dan said earlier, is we anticipate that those numbers will go up, but we certainly don't expect them to exceed where we were over the last couple of years. That being said, I think finding the appropriate facility and programming has been challenging, and finding it within the state of Pennsylvania, especially if there are mental health needs. Our youth, generally finding an in-state residential program has been a challenge. And then we're faced with out-of-state placements. Are there any questions from online? Any other questions tonight? Great, well, thank you. Everybody stay safe.